Frozen wallet, frozen hearts. A homeless girl finds a billionaire's lost wallet and faces a choice that quietly sets destiny in motion. Hello guys, welcome to my channel, where interesting stories of love, communication, and empathy is told. If you enjoy emotional stories that touch the heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends, and tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. She had 2 coins in her pocket and nowhere to sleep that night. The wind moved through downtown Chicago like it owned the streets. It pressed against her thin jacket, slid under her sleeves, and reminded her that the city could be beautiful and cruel at the same time. Aria Cole stood outside Union Station asking for work. Not money, work. She offered to clean windshields, carry groceries, sweep sidewalks. "I'm not asking for cash," she would say softly. "Just something to do." Most people avoided her eyes. Some pretended to be busy. A few muttered, "Move along." By noon, hunger felt like a heavy stone in her stomach. It wasn't dramatic hunger. It was quiet, patient, the kind that slowly makes your thoughts blurry. She touched the 2 coins in her pocket again. Not enough for food. Not enough for a bus ride. Not enough for anything meaningful. That was when she saw it. A sleek silver car stopped near the curb. It wasn't just any car. It gleamed. It looked like the kind of car that didn't know what potholes felt like. A man stepped out. Mid-30s, navy-tailored suit. Clean haircut. The kind of confidence that didn't need to announce itself. He was on the phone. "Delay the transfer." "I said delay it," he snapped. His voice carried authority without effort. He didn't look at anyone as he crossed toward the towering glass building across the street, Halston Global Group. Even Aria knew that name. In Chicago, Halston Global meant tech investments, luxury developments, headlines. It meant power. The car drove away, and something small slipped from the man's coat pocket and hit the pavement. A leather card holder. Aria blinked. She looked around. No one else noticed. She walked toward it slowly, like it might disappear. When she picked it up, her hands felt cold. Inside were platinum cards, thick folded cash, and an ID. Ethan Halston, founder and executive chairman. Her heart skipped once. Everyone knew Ethan Halston. He was described in magazines as brilliant, ruthless, strategic, untouchable. The money inside that wallet could change her week, maybe her month. She imagined renting a small room, eating hot food, showering without worrying about time. For 1 second, just one, she imagined keeping it. No one had seen, no cameras that she noticed, no witnesses. The wind pushed against her again. And then she heard her father's voice in her memory, calm, steady. "We can be poor, Aria," he used to say, "but we can't be dishonest." Her father had worked construction his whole life. Hard hands, gentle heart. He had passed 2 years ago. But his words still lived in her like a compass. She closed the wallet. She stared at the glass building across the street. The doors were tall and reflective, the kind of entrance that made you feel smaller before you even stepped inside. Her shoes were worn, her jacket thin, her pride fragile but intact. She crossed the street anyway. The security guard near the entrance looked at her and smirked slightly. "You lost?" he asked, eyes flicking to her sneakers. "I found something that belongs to Mr. Halston," she replied quietly. He laughed under his breath. "You and everyone else." She held up the card holder without opening it. That changed his expression. 10 minutes later, she stood inside a private office that smelled like leather, polished wood, and expensive decisions. Ethan Halston stood near the window with his back turned. The skyline stretched behind him. He didn't rush. He didn't look nervous. He looked like a man who expected the world to wait for him. When he turned, his eyes were sharp, assessing. "You were caught with my property," he said calmly. "I wasn't caught," she answered. "I came to return it." He stepped closer. She could see the faint crease between his brows. He extended his hand. She placed the wallet in it. He opened it carefully, counted the cash, checked the cards. All there. Then he paused. "There was a folded slip inside," he said quietly. "What did it say?" Aria swallowed. It said, "Postpone tonight's board vote." Silence. That note had been tucked into an inner lining, not visible unless someone looked closely. He studied her differently now, not as a nuisance, not as a problem. "Why didn't you take the money?" he asked. "Because it wasn't mine." "You're clearly struggling." "Yes." "And you still walked in here?" She lifted her chin slightly. Not in defiance, in dignity. "I need work," she said, "not stolen money." Something shifted in the air. It was subtle, but real. For a moment, Ethan remembered being 19, sleeping in a cramped apartment, counting coins for subway fare. He didn't talk about those days anymore. Success had polished over that version of him. But it hadn't erased it. He studied her hands. They trembled slightly from cold, not fear. "You're not afraid of walking into places you don't belong?" he asked. She gave a small, almost tired smile. "Sometimes you've just got to try," she said softly. "It's okay to feel out of place, but you still show up." He didn't smile back, but something behind his eyes softened. "Report to operations tomorrow morning," he said. "Temporary support staff." She blinked. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a chance." That night, for the first time in weeks, Aria didn't sleep behind a station bench. She slept in a small budget motel room she paid for, with her 2 coins and a kind receptionist who agreed to let her settle the rest after her first paycheck. As she lay there, staring at the ceiling, she whispered to herself, "You've got this." Across the city, in a penthouse overlooking the lake, Ethan Halston stared at the same skyline. He turned the folded slip in his hand again. Postpone tonight's board vote. Who had placed it there? And why had it been hidden so carefully? He thought about the homeless girl who had walked into his empire with nothing but honesty. He didn't know it yet. But that small act of integrity had just reopened doors that powerful men had spent years trying to keep shut. And neither of them would ever see the city the same way again. Her honesty earns her entry into his corporate world, where suspicion, tension, and unseen enemies begin circling. Ari arrived at Halston Global before sunrise the next morning. The city still carried the grey hush of early commuters, and the glass tower reflected a sky that hadn't fully decided to be blue yet. She paused at the entrance, smoothing her borrowed blouse, kindly donated by the motel receptionist who had said, "We've all needed a fresh start at some point, sweetheart." It reminded Aria of Aunt Mabel trying to bake cookies at midnight and burning half the batch. Good intentions sometimes arrive before perfection. She smiled faintly at the thought and stepped inside. The lobby felt colder than the wind outside, but not because of temperature. It was the quiet kind of cold. Polished marble, sharp heels clicking, eyes that measured before greeting. She signed in, and the same security guard from yesterday gave her a nod that was less mocking, more curious. "Operations, 10th floor," he said. The elevator ride felt longer than it was. She watched her reflection in the mirrored wall. She looked small, but not invisible. On the 10th floor, the operations manager, Ms. Darnell, greeted her with brisk efficiency. "Temporary support," she said, handing Aria a badge. "You'll file reports, sort invoices, and keep your head down." Aria nodded. Keep your head down. She had done that most of her life. But Halston Global hummed with tension beneath its sleek exterior. Employees spoke in lowered tones near the coffee machine. Meetings were called and cancelled within minutes. Names were whispered, especially when board vote came up. By midday, Aria had already noticed something strange. Several financial summaries didn't match the printed ledger totals. A few expense reports were duplicated under different department codes. She didn't understand corporate strategy, but numbers were numbers, and these didn't feel right. She mentioned it quietly to a senior analyst named Victor. He stiffened. "You're new," he said. "Focus on your task." It wasn't advice. It was warning. Upstairs, Ethan Halston sat at the head of a long conference table. The postponed board vote loomed like a storm cloud. The merger proposal had been aggressive, risky, and strangely rushed. He had trusted his executive team. He always did. But that folded slip inside his wallet, hidden so deliberately, felt like a message from someone who didn't trust the process. Later that afternoon, Ethan walked through operations unannounced. Conversations straightened, screens minimized. His gaze landed on Aria. She froze for a second, but then returned to sorting files. He approached her desk. "Settling in?" "Yes, sir." He noticed the careful organization of documents in front of her. "You flagged discrepancies?" She hesitated. "I wasn't sure if I should." "Answer the question." "Yes." He studied the highlighted columns, duplicate entries, inflated vendor fees. "These could be clerical," he said evenly. "They could," she replied, "but they repeat in 3 quarters." There it was again, that quiet steadiness. He didn't praise her, but he didn't dismiss her either. "Send copies to my office," he said. Word traveled fast. By evening, eyes followed her differently. Not with curiosity now, but calculation. 2 days later, her locker was broken into. Nothing valuable was taken. Just her notebook, the one where she had scribbled observations. She felt the shift immediately. The atmosphere around her desk grew tight. Laughter stopped when she approached. An anonymous message appeared in her inbox. "You don't belong here. Leave." Her fingers trembled slightly. "It's okay to feel afraid," she told herself. "Fear doesn't mean stop." That night, she almost quit. She stood outside the building after her shift, staring at the skyline turning gold with sunset. Chicago could be breathtaking when it wanted to be. Ethan stepped out moments later, pausing when he saw her. "You look like you're debating something," he said. "I am." "Care to share?" She swallowed. If someone higher up is involved in financial manipulation, what happens to the person who finds out? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Why do you ask?" "Hypothetically." "There are no hypotheticals in business," he replied. She looked at him directly. "Then, hypothetically, integrity should matter." He held her gaze longer than necessary. "Integrity always matters," he said quietly. "The question is, whether people are willing to protect it. "Are you?" she asked. The boldness surprised even her. He didn't answer immediately. Wind brushed between them. "Yes," he said finally. The next week escalated quickly. A falsified authorization form appeared with Aria's digital signature approving a suspicious vendor payment. Internal compliance launched a quiet inquiry. Victor avoided her entirely now. She felt cornered. In a closed-door meeting, Ethan reviewed surveillance footage from the finance wing. Hours passed. Then there it was. A senior executive, Marcus Leland, entering operations after hours, slipping something into her desk drawer. Ethan leaned back slowly. It wasn't a clerical error. It was deliberate framing. And it wasn't small. Marcus Leland had been with Holston Global since the early days, trusted, strategic, loyal, or so Ethan believed. That night, Ethan sat alone in his office. City lights blinked below. He remembered being young and underestimated. He remembered investors laughing at his first pitch. And he remembered promising himself he would build something clean, something earned. Had he missed the rot growing under polished floors? Downstairs, Aria packed her bag quietly, unaware that a quiet war had just begun inside boardrooms she had never stepped into. She stepped outside again, breathing in the cool night air. "You've got this," she whispered. She didn't know how big the storm was. She didn't know how deep it went. But she had already stepped into a world where glass towers reflected more than sunlight. They reflected secrets. And some of those secrets were starting to crack. Strange threats escalate as buried secrets about her mother's mysterious death start surfacing. The quiet war inside Holston Global did not announce itself with shouting matches or dramatic headlines. It moved like fog, subtle, creeping, difficult to grasp until it was already surrounding everything. Aria felt it first in the silence. Conversations stopped when she walked by. Emails that once received quick replies now lingered unanswered. Even the office air seemed heavier, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Compliance cleared her name within days after Ethan personally reviewed the surveillance footage. Marcus Leland's late-night visit to her desk could not be explained away as coincidence. But instead of immediate termination, Marcus remained in his role, temporarily under review. That decision unsettled Aria. If someone had tried to frame her once, what would stop them from trying again? One evening, as she organized archived files in a storage room on the 12th floor, she stumbled across a set of older financial records. They were dated nearly 8 years back, around the time Holston Global expanded aggressively into international markets. A familiar surname caught her eye. Cole. Her breath caught. She flipped the page. Elena Cole, external financial consultant. Her mother. Aria sank slowly into the nearby chair, heart pounding in her ears. Her mother had worked as a consultant for multiple firms before her sudden death, in what police had labeled a routine highway accident, a truck losing control. Bad weather, case closed. But Aria remembered that night differently. She remembered her mother's voice sounding tense on the phone days before the accident. "If anything happens to me," Elena had once said quietly, "remember that truth always surfaces, even when people try to bury it." At the time, Aria had thought it was stress talking. Financial audits, long hours. Nothing unusual. Now the pieces felt less random. She made copies of the documents quietly. The next morning, she requested a meeting with Ethan. He studied her face carefully when she entered his office. "You look like you haven't slept." "I found something," she replied, placing the copied files on his desk. He scanned the name. Elena Cole. His eyes flickered. Recognition. "She consulted during our early expansion," he said slowly. "Strong reputation." "She was my mother." Silence settled between them. Ethan leaned back, recalculating something internally. "Your mother died in an accident." "That's what they said." She told him about the phone call, the tension, the unfinished conversations. He listened without interruption. When she finished, he folded his hands. "If what you're implying is true, it means corruption didn't just begin recently. It means it's been embedded here for years." She nodded. Someone silenced her. The word hung in the air. Silenced. Ethan stood and walked toward the window, staring at the city below. He had built Halston Global from almost nothing. Late nights, risky investments, relentless drive. But had ambition blinded him? "You're asking me to believe that someone within my company orchestrated fraud years ago and possibly covered up your mother's death," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to look at the evidence." There was no accusation in her voice, just steady resolve. Later that week, threats escalated. A black sedan began appearing outside Aria's motel at odd hours. Anonymous calls rang her phone at midnight, followed by silence when she answered. One evening, a single envelope slid under her door. Inside was a newspaper clipping of her mother's accident report. Across it, in red ink, were the words, "Let the past stay buried." Her hands trembled. "It's okay to feel afraid," she reminded herself. "Fear doesn't mean you stop." She called Ethan. He arrived within 20 minutes. When she handed him the envelope, his jaw tightened visibly. "This is intimidation," he said flatly. "Yes." "You should have security." "I don't want protection," she replied softly. "I want the truth." He looked at her differently then, not as an employee, not as a responsibility, but as someone standing at the edge of something dangerous and refusing to step back. In the following days, Ethan authorized a confidential internal investigation led by an external forensic firm, quietly, discreetly. The findings were disturbing. Financial irregularities dating back nearly a decade. Shell vendors. Offshore transfers. Strategic timing around major expansion deals. And Elena Cole's final audit report, never formally submitted. It had been intercepted. The digital trail showed access from Marcus Leland's credentials. But Marcus had not acted alone. Board members' emails suggested coordination, discussions about managing reputational risk, conversations about neutralizing threats. Aria read the summaries with a calm she did not feel inside. So her mother had not been paranoid. She had been close to exposing something. Too close. One late night in the nearly empty office, Aria stood by the large conference table where the postponed board vote was meant to happen. Ethan joined her quietly. "She died because she believed in accountability," Aria said, voice steady but soft. "I used to resent that. I wished she had chosen safety instead." "And now?" he asked. "Now I understand." He watched her closely. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said. She gave a small, tired smile. Neither do you. For the first time, Ethan felt the weight of something beyond financial risk. This wasn't about stock prices. It wasn't about mergers. It was about legacy. And whether the empire he built would stand on integrity or collapse under hidden rot. Outside, Chicago pulsed with its usual rhythm. Traffic, laughter, neon lights flickering on. Inside Halston Global, a reckoning was forming. Because the past had not stayed buried. It had waited. And now, truth was knocking. Evidence of corruption explodes, forcing the billionaire to confront betrayal within his own empire. The reckoning did not arrive with sirens. It arrived with documents. Thick files. Time-stamped emails. Transaction trails that told stories no one wanted told. Ethan sat at the head of the boardroom table, where power had always felt controlled, predictable. This time, it felt volatile. Marcus Leland sat 3 seats to his right, composed but pale. Around the table, board members shifted in leather chairs that suddenly seemed less comfortable. The external forensic team projected their findings onto the large screen. Offshore accounts linked to shell corporations. Vendor contracts inflated beyond market rates. Internal audit reports flagged and then digitally altered. And finally, Elena Cole's suppressed audit summary. A silence heavier than any argument settled over the room. Marcus cleared his throat. These interpretations are aggressive. Corporate expansion involves complexity. Complexity, Ethan repeated slowly, does not include forging digital signatures or burying compliance reports. He pressed a button on the remote. The surveillance footage appeared. Marcus entering operations after hours, slipping cash into Aria's drawer. Marcus's jaw tightened. That was a misunderstanding. It was a setup, Ethan said evenly. The room shifted. Another board member, Thomas Wexler, leaned forward. Ethan, let's not make rash conclusions. Public scandal could destroy shareholder confidence. Integrity isn't rash, Ethan replied. It's overdue. Aria watched from a side seat as an observer. Her hands were clasped tightly, but her posture remained steady. She wasn't there for revenge. She was there for truth. The forensic lead continued. We also uncovered communications referencing a containment strategy regarding a consultant who raised concerns 8 years ago. Elena Cole's photo appeared on screen. Aria's breath caught, but she didn't look away. Emails exchanged between Marcus and 2 other board members discussed neutralizing reputational risk after Elena flagged discrepancies tied to international property acquisitions. Thomas Wexler spoke sharply. Those messages are being mischaracterized. Are they? Ethan asked quietly. He stood. I built this company with borrowed money and sleepless nights. I promised myself it would be clean. If corruption lived here, it lived without my knowledge. That ends now. Marcus's composure cracked. You're going to burn your own house down over a consultant's outdated report? Ethan's gaze hardened. Over integrity. The vote that had once been postponed was now replaced with another. Removal. Investigation referral. Full disclosure to regulatory authorities. The room erupted in overlapping arguments. But momentum had shifted. When the final vote concluded, Marcus Leland and 2 complicit board members were formally suspended pending criminal investigation. For the first time in years, Halston Global felt uncertain. Stocks dipped within hours of the press release. News outlets speculated. Financial analysts debated whether Ethan's transparency was strategic bravery or corporate suicide. Inside the building, employees whispered. Some feared layoffs, others quietly applauded. Arya walked through the lobby days later and noticed something subtle. The atmosphere felt lighter. Still tense, but honest. Ethan called her into his office that evening. He looked tired, not physically, but emotionally. "This isn't finished," he said. "I know." "There will be legal battles, media scrutiny." She nodded. "Truth isn't convenient." A faint smile touched his lips. "You sound like your mother." She looked down briefly. "I hope that's a compliment." "It is." There was a pause. "Why didn't you walk away?" he asked. She considered the question carefully. "I almost did," she admitted. "But if I left, nothing would change, and she deserved more than silence." He exhaled slowly. "You forced me to confront things I should have questioned sooner." "You built something powerful," she replied softly. "It just needed cleaning." He laughed lightly for the first time in weeks. That's one way to describe corporate reform. Outside, protests and news vans occasionally gathered near the building entrance. The story of a billionaire exposing corruption inside his own empire spread quickly. Debate filled social media. Was he protecting his image, or truly reforming? Arya avoided interviews. She didn't want fame. She wanted peace. Months passed as investigations unfolded. Charges were filed. Financial restitution processes began. Regulatory oversight tightened. Halston Global's reputation took hits, but it didn't collapse. In fact, something unexpected happened. Investors who valued ethical governance began expressing renewed interest. Employees felt safer reporting concerns. Internal audits became transparent. Integrity, though costly, proved stabilizing. One evening, nearly a year after the boardroom confrontation, Arya stood once again by the conference table. It looked the same. But it wasn't. Ethan joined her. "They'll remember this year," he said quietly. "For the scandal?" "For the correction." She studied the skyline beyond the glass. "You once asked if I was afraid to walk into places I didn't belong," she said. "And?" "I don't feel that way anymore." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Neither do I," he admitted. Because power without accountability had nearly hollowed his empire. And a homeless girl with 2 coins had reminded him of the foundation he once believed in. But destiny wasn't finished shaping their paths yet. Time would stretch. Years would pass. And the girl who once slept behind a train station would step into a future neither of them had imagined. From a forgotten girl to a catalyst for transformation and redemption. Arya's life had changed in ways she hadn't dared to imagine while clutching those 2 coins outside the train station. The cold wind and the ache of hunger were no longer daily companions. They had been replaced by the hum of office lights and the quiet weight of responsibility. Yet even amidst new routines and the safety of employment, she felt a constant pull toward the past, a reminder that everything she had overcome was built on integrity, courage, and choices that refused to compromise her values. Each morning, she arrived early at Halston Global, now wearing a simple yet crisp uniform that signaled her position in operations without drawing attention. She greeted colleagues with a soft smile, some nodding respectfully, others curious about the girl who had confronted a billionaire and returned a wallet full of cash. They whispered, speculated, sometimes even admired her. Yet Arya stayed grounded. She remembered her father's voice, the lessons of honesty and dignity, and she carried them like a shield, a compass guiding each decision. Ethan observed her from his office often. There was a cautious admiration in his gaze, but also a growing realization of the power of character over wealth. He found himself consulting her on small operational matters, sometimes even asking for her insight into employee concerns. "It's funny," he admitted one afternoon over coffee in the staff lounge. "I thought I built an empire. Turns out the real foundations are people like you." Arya blushed, shifting her eyes to the window, a slight grin tugging at her lips. She had never sought praise, and yet she could not deny the warmth of his words. The company slowly healed under their combined influence. Policies were rewritten. Corrupt executives were replaced with transparent leadership. Arya's insight, often subtle but precise, guided ethical restructuring that no consultant could have achieved. Employees began to feel seen, valued, and safe to speak up when things went wrong. Stories of how the empire had once been silently corrupted were openly discussed, not to shame, but to educate. Arya sometimes caught Ethan lingering behind the glass partitions, quietly observing her interactions, perhaps trying to understand how integrity could inspire so much change. Outside the office, the city continued its relentless pace. Arya would sometimes pause, walking home past street corners where she once begged for work. She recognized the faces of those struggling, and though she no longer faced the same desperation, she remembered it vividly. She carried small acts of kindness, a warm meal here, advice there, a listening ear for someone navigating life's sharp edges. The lessons she had learned in hardship remained as sharp as ever, and she used them as quietly powerful tools for change. One evening, a young intern approached her timidly. "Miss Arya, can I ask you something? How did you do it? Face him, and still choose the right path?" She smiled gently, kneeling to meet his gaze. "Courage isn't about having no fear," she said softly. "It's about choosing what's right, even when fear whispers louder than logic. And sometimes, the smallest decision can create the largest ripple." He nodded slowly, absorbing her words, understanding that the acts of integrity that often felt invisible were in truth the most impactful. Months turned into years, and Arya's role evolved naturally. She became a trusted advisor to Ethan, not because of her social standing, but because she had consistently proven that wisdom, patience, and empathy could guide even the most powerful figures. Their partnership, built on mutual respect, slowly reshaped Halston Global into a model of ethical success. No longer were profits the sole measure of achievement. Integrity, transparency, and employee well-being were given equal weight. One crisp autumn morning, Arya stood by the glass atrium, watching city buses streak past golden leaves. A news headline flashed on her phone. Halston Global recognized for unprecedented corporate transparency. She smiled softly, remembering the first day she had walked into that towering building. The weight of the leather wallet had been small, yet it had carried a burden of trust, and her decision had set off a chain reaction that now touched thousands. Ethan joined her silently, his presence a quiet affirmation of the journey they had traveled. "You've changed everything," he said. "Not just the company. Me. How I see the world." Arya looked up at him with a gentle nod. "And you changed my life too," she replied. "Not because of money, but because you gave me a chance to be seen for who I am, not just where I came from." The moment lingered, words unspoken between them, heavy with gratitude, humility, and shared understanding. As the city lights flickered on, Arya knew that life would continue to test both of them in different ways. Yet the bond they shared, forged in integrity, resilience, and courage, had created a foundation that was unshakable. She had once been a girl with two coins, hungry and cold, facing a world that seemed indifferent. Now, she was a woman who understood the quiet power of honesty, the resilience of the human spirit, and the extraordinary impact one person could have on even the mightiest empires. In time, Aria became a symbol not just of corporate integrity, but of hope. Stories of her choices spread quietly through the company, inspiring interns, young employees, and even executives to act with courage and principle. She remained humble, always reminding those around her, it isn't wealth or status that defines a person, it's the choices made when no one is watching. And she never forgot the truth her father had taught her. We can be poor, but we can't be dishonest. Those words, simple yet profound, guided every decision she made, every life she touched, every ripple she sent through the world. The final transformation wasn't just in Aria or Ethan, it was in Halston Global itself. A corporate empire had been rebuilt not through money, influence or fear, but through honesty, transparency, and the courage to do what was right. And all it took was one homeless girl, a lost wallet, and a choice that shocked a billionaire to his core. Aria often paused at her old neighborhood, gazing at the city skyline that had once seemed unreachable. She would smile, remembering her journey, quietly teaching others through example that the smallest acts of integrity can create revolutions, that kindness matters, and that resilience can rewrite destinies. And in the quiet moments, she would whisper to herself, "You've got this," reminding everyone who would listen that courage and honesty are always worth the risk. Hello guys, welcome to my channel, where interesting stories of love, communication, and empathy are told. If you enjoyed Aria's journey and how one act of honesty can change everything, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, share with your friends, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done if you were Aria? How does integrity shape your life? Let's talk about it. Moral lesson weaned down. Life will test your patience, courage, and honesty, but every choice matters. Even when no one is watching, integrity has power. Small acts of kindness, courage, and truth ripple far beyond expectation, shaping futures, rebuilding broken systems, and inspiring others. Aria's journey reminds us that adversity can sharpen wisdom, and moral courage can influence even the most powerful. Trust yourself, uphold what is right, and remember that character defines destiny more than wealth or status ever could. Every choice has weight. Choose wisely, act kindly, and never underestimate your impact on the world.